Danish, US, and Greenland officials to meet over White House annexation threats. Russia also uses ballistic missile on Ukraine in warning to the West. We are going to check that out. So we also check out what is actually at stake and why Trump actually wants Greenland. The kind of mineral resources that is actually up for grab, and everybody just wants a bit of it. So this is just going back to those years or those era, and everyone is kind of, oh, this is up for grab. Everybody wants a slice of the cake. So let's check what President Donald Trump says about that.
Policy question. How much money are you thinking of giving people in Greenland to get them on board with a possible U.S.
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that. But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland. And we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay?
Now, so it's just trying to make a play right here by making a move first. And likewise, we can see him with the show of flexing of power with what happened to the president of Venezuela. So I think Donald Trump is trying to make a play here.
I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. And by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too. I have to tell you, and they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also. But we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way. Please, go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. President, why is it so important to you to own it when you have a military presence there, which you could expand to affect the security?
Because when we own it, we defend it. You don't defend leases the same way. You have to own it. And, with a nation, look at what happened with Obama, with that horrible deal they made with Iran. It was a short-term deal. It was like a 9-year deal. Countries can't make 9-year deals or even 100-year deals. Countries have to have ownership. And you defend ownership, you don't defend leases. And we'll have to defend Greenland. If we don't do it, China or Russia will. It's not going to happen. We are not going to have, and I like China, I like Russia, I love the people of China, I love the people of Russia. I get along.
This is actually the play. Listen to it.
Very well with President Putin, but I'm very disappointed in him. I get along very well with President Xi. I'm going to go over to China in April, but I don't want them as a neighbor in Greenland. Not going to happen. And by the way, and NATO's got to understand that. I'm all for NATO. I saved NATO. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have a NATO right now. But we're not going to allow Russia or China to occupy Greenland, and that's what's going to happen if we don't.
Greenland, a territory with just 56,000 people, may soon become one of the most important places in the whole world. But maybe not for the reasons that you might think. You see, while many headlines talk about the military invasion of the USA of Greenland, there is really something much deeper going on here that could change the trajectory of the entire world. In economics, we have a concept called utility. For something to have value, it generally needs to be useful. But Greenland is a giant frozen no-fly zone for human habitation. 80% of it is covered by an ice sheet that is, in some places, 3 kilometers thick. It's like a giant literal frozen paywall. And that brings us to the question that's being brought up in the news all the time, and that is, why is the wealthiest nation on Earth, the United States, so obsessed with buying a giant block of ice that's 99.96% empty? You see, Greenland is a bunch of potential. To some people, it may seem like a bunch of nothing, but to the United States, it's a $3 trillion vault where the key is slowly melting away. And what's inside that $3 trillion vault? Well, it's largely rare earth metals. Right now, as you watch this, you are likely holding a tiny piece of China. Not a physical piece of land, but the chemical soul of your device. China currently controls 60% of rare earth mining and a staggering 90% of rare earth processing. If the world of technology was a giant kitchen, China owns the stove, the pans, and 9 out of 10 of the ingredients. This is what many economists would call a monopoly. Rare earth metals like neodymium and praseodymium are in things like smartphones and laptops. They're also the vitamins of the modern military around the world. They are in the guidance systems of Tomahawk missiles, the motors of F-35 jets, and the permanent magnets of every EV on the road. You see, without rare earths, our entire modern technology sector just doesn't exist. And so enter reason number 1 for the Greenland gamble. Geologists estimate that Greenland holds some of the world's largest untapped deposits of these minerals. We're talking about the sites of Tanbreez and Kvenfeld. which contain enough heavy rare earths to power the entire Western world's green transition for decades. Now, for the US, acquiring Greenland isn't just like a real estate play. You know, despite what everyone thinks, Trump doesn't want to buy it to put a Trump Tower right in the center of Greenland. Reason number one points to more of a resource play. And that brings up the question, why buy the whole island? Why buy all of Greenland and not just buy the minerals that it has? Well, because there's something called a subsidy trap. Every year, the Danish government hands Greenland a block grant of about $511 million. That represents 20% of Greenland's GDP, and to Denmark, this is a liability. I mean, it's a $500 million hole in its budget. But to the US federal government, $511 million is less than a rounding error in some cases. To put that in perspective, in 2025, the US military budget is approaching $1 trillion. If the US bought Greenland, the annual maintenance cost, which is the block grant, would be roughly 0.05% of just the military budget, which isn't even a top two thing in the federal budget for the United States. Actually, here's a fun fact. The US military has previously spent $20.2 billion a year just on air conditioning for troops in desert environments. That's nearly 40 years of Greenland's total Danish subsidies spent just to keep some tents.
I know Trump doesn't make a play for just making a play safe. There's over and over again. There's a lot of funding is going down, back and forth.
Large crowds of protesters have marched through the Iranian capital Tehran in what's been described as the largest demonstrations against the ruling regime for more than 15 years. What began as anger over a deepening economic crisis in the country has now also turned into calls for the overthrow of Iran's supreme leader. Well, US President Donald Trump has again reiterated that the US would strike very hard, as he put it, if Iran begins killing protesters. Human rights organizations say more than 30 people have reportedly been killed. Arman Mahmoudyan is a research fellow at the Global and National Security Institute. He joined me earlier and I asked him just how significant these protests are.
I must say that these protests is the strongest challenge that Islamic Republic has faced. I mean, Islamic Republic has gone through episodes of the, chaos, instability since its beginning, be as it war, the elite splits, political assassination, pandemics, the June attack by the Israelis. But this one, I think, is the serious.
Well, the general public actually puts the elected people governing them right now. So why would you treat them that way? Especially taking out the internet and making everything seem like they're being played for example, let's say gimmicks or tricks that has been used by several governments of different countries, and the aftermath of it was chaos, total chaos.
Threat that targets or aims at the very existence of the Islamic Republic. And there's various reasons behind that. I think the primary reason that this protest is quite significant is that Islamic Republic has shows that, unlike the previous protests, as a struggle to wrap up the protesters or mobilize its forces to confront protesters. They are using the violence, but unlike the previous times, we are not seeing any evidence that suggests that the use of violence, force, or even shutting down the internet earlier today has kind of forced the protesters to sit back or go back to them. As a matter of the fact, all these methods or application that have achieved is to just make the situation worsen. We have seen the size, the volume of the protesters has grown, and it seems for now at least they have no desire to sit back or go back home. It doesn't mean that the end of the Islamic Republic is guaranteed or near, but I can say that if historically speaking, this is as close as they could get to the collapse.
What does it say in your mind that Iranians, from these protests taking place, are not afraid of pushback by the military, by the security forces, and going as far as to call for the supreme leader to be removed? What does that tell us about the state of the country?
The person behind this, who is fueling this massive protest, is an exiled Iran crown prince, and he's making a play also here. So everything is just a power grab,
To be frank, it's a great question. It's a $1 million question. My answer to it, my analysis would be that, look, there is just so much of a frustration that the population of the country can take. The Iranian people are under every single pressure that you can assume short of a civil war. Just a couple months ago, they experienced a war. The country didn't achieve a good result in it. They have been dealing with the international sanctions for decades. Iranian people have no connection to the international banks. There is no Visa card, MasterCard, no credit card. They are under the political suppression. Basically, despite who they elect or who they send to the post or the presidential office, the policy of our country has not changed. The foreign policy, the domestic policy has not changed. Iranian women have been under significant level of the discrimination. They've been victim of the discrimination. We have witnessed a couple of years through the Mahsa Amini movement, the Women Life Liberty movement. And above all of this, the economic situation in Iran is unbelievably harsh.
Unrest continues to grow in Iran, with street demonstrations raging in cities cities across the country. Protesters have been publicly calling for the end of the Islamic Republic as its rulers look more and more vulnerable than during previous popular uprisings. The exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has now called on demonstrators to seize Iranian city centers. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has refused to back down. Authorities blacked out the internet for a second night in a row as rights groups say dozens of people have been killed.
Renee Good's fatal encounter with ICE agent Jonathan Ross. Using surveillance footage, bystander video, and Ross's own phone, CNN synced multiple perspectives of the shooting and mapped this incident in 3D space. Taken together, they show the fullest picture yet of what happened that day. A home surveillance camera captures the moment Renee Good pulls up in a maroon-colored Honda SUV 4 minutes before the shooting. 20 seconds after she arrives, her passenger and wife, Becca, wearing a white beanie, gets out of Good's car. Good then parks the SUV perpendicular in the road. Here's how Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem described what Good did.
ICE officers and agents approached the vehicle of the individual in question, who was blocking the officers in with her vehicle, and she had been stalking and impeding their work all throughout the day.
Available video doesn't show any possible contact Good may have had with ICE before this confrontation. What this video does show is that for a few minutes, while she is perpendicular to the roadway, several vehicles drive by. Even large SUVs are able to drive around her as she moves back and forth on the street, and that includes this light-colored SUV. It slowly drives around Good's car from the rear and stops. Agent Jonathan Ross is recording video from his cell phone as he crosses in front of Good's car, recording as he sees her up close. She looks calm, and you can see both of her hands as she talks to the officer.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you.
Renee Good's wife, Becca, who had been the passenger in the car, approaches. Cell phone cameras on the street start recording as Ross walks around Good's car with Good's wife following.
I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Renee Good backs her car up as the agent walks around the front of the vehicle. At the same time, on the other side, 2 more agents approach. One tries to open the door as Good backs up. Good's vehicle starts moving. From Ross's cell phone video, you see Becca, the woman in the white beanie, trying to get into the car again. You also see Renee Good turning the steering wheel to the right. She then accelerates. Slowing this down again and matching the exact time of these 2 angles. This angle appears to show the vehicle moving close to the agent. But in this angle, he does not appear to be in the path of the vehicle when he fired. Seconds later, Becca Good runs to her wife, followed by the agent who fired his weapon. He briefly looks into the driver's side of the car and then walks away.
Shame!
Now, what we cannot see in Ross's cell phone video is if the SUV made contact with the agent because the camera angle jerks up to the sky. But DHS still says it supports the agency's initial position, releasing the statement saying, quote, the footage corroborates what DHS has stated all along, that this individual was impeding law enforcement and weaponized her vehicle in an attempt to kill or cause bodily harm to federal law enforcement. The officer was in fear of his own life, the lives of his fellow officers, and acted in self-defense. The American people can watch this video with their own eyes and ears and judge for themselves. The shooting itself, Aaron, is also not visible. You do, though, hear 3 gunshots. Aaron.
All right, Kyung La, thank you very much. That is incredible work, just to see all that put together. Everyone's here with me.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this is your brain when you're in the zone. But getting in the zone and staying there, that feels...
Joey, does that change anything? Obviously, this new video is a new perspective, but then just as Kyung has reconstructed frame by frame those crucial instances from all the perspectives we now have.
I think it's problematic for the officers with respect to justifying the force, and I'll explain why. The first thing is, let's talk about the policy. I do have the Department of Justice policy, which talks about the preservation of life, but it also talks about the obligation to get out of the path of the vehicle, right? Not to stand and shoot. It talks about getting out of the path of the vehicle, and it also talks about de-escalation. Why is that significant? I don't see much de-escalation there. That's important. I hear words to the effect of effing bitch. That goes to me to state of mind. So if you're not...
Of the officer.
Right. I mean, so it's one thing to defend yourself. It's another thing to be angry and use animus with regard to employing force. The other thing that's troubling to me is that if you're not standing in front of the vehicle, but if it seems to be, I'm not saying it, it's what the video shows, you're off to the side of the vehicle, then how is it representing an imminent threat to death or physical injury? The other issue is you have to justify every projectile. If you're shooting a projectile and the car's not coming at you, what's the basis? And if you're shooting into the window when the vehicle's going away from you, that's further problematic as well. So it goes against the notion of immediate fear of death or serious injury. It goes against the notion of the proportionality of the force. And finally, Aaron, it goes against the issue of it being reasonable. So as I see this, it's a problem to me for the officer, even though the White House says there's nothing to see here. There is plenty to see from my perspective.
So much to see. I mean, John, because also one thing you see her do, well, there's a couple things that would show. First of all, her wife, Renee's wife, moves to get in the car, which would indicate they're leaving, which they were told to do, right? She moves to get into the car at that moment, stop filming. Okay, number one. Number two, then you see her on the officer, turn her wheel sharply away from him, and then the acceleration. Now, I know every single instant is going to matter in terms of what really happened, but there's no mistaking what she's doing with the wheel.
Only if you're looking at it.
And we don't know whether in his tunnel vision he was focused on her or the front of that vehicle or its direction. But what we do know is the value of this video is it's another angle.
Yep.
We came to conclusions, which are now questioned when we looked at the first video, because we got a second video. This would be a third video, which is instructive in a different way. What do we get out of this? We get three things. One, we get that it's not a high-tension situation. She's smiling and saying, I'm not mad. And her friend is taunting them, but saying, you know, here's our license plate. We're not wearing
Right, we don't
masks.
change our license plate. By the way, awareness of if you want to come and get us later, go ahead.
Right.
You know, have the license number.
So, I mean, tensions at that point are low. As he comes around the car, the officers who pull up in the pickup truck are saying, out of the car, out of the car. They're grabbing one door handle, which is locked. She starts to accelerate. Her wife is on the other door handle, which is also locked. And if you look at that video, here it is. When we come around to the front of that car, this is a different video.
Yeah.
When we come around to the front of that car, which we'll do in a minute,
Yeah.
you see, that if you're the agent, his point of view is the car is now moving forward. He unholsters his weapon, and you see the car moving towards him. Then you lose sight because the phone goes down as the gun comes up.
Yeah.
But you hear an impact, what sounds like an impact, which leans towards the officer's account and DHS's assertion that the vehicle made contact with him.
Right.
And you hear a groan. And simultaneous with that, not separate, you hear these three shots. At the end of the day, the three things they're going to have to consider is, are they in policy with the agency? Probably not. Were the tactics good? It would have been easier to leave your weapon holster and get out of the way than to end up in this confrontation. But was it legal? Did he feel threatened in the moment he pulled the trigger?
Well, Gil, what do you see there?
Well, there's nothing that a city police officer would do in that situation that approximates what the ICE agent did.
Meaning in terms of the level of force.
They've all been trained to get out of the way of a car.
Yeah, not only the level of force, but all of the other tactics. I mean, there is one reason that the president, the vice president, and the secretary are so hyperbolic over this, because they want to get out from and away from this as fast as possible. This is their worst case scenario of a white woman, a mother, being shot by ICE agents, a U.S. citizen. And so that's their whole mission, is to get away from it. And they say, well, you know, the American people can look at this video and make their own decisions. Unfortunately for the administration, the American people have already looked at this video and they have made a determination about this. This is their Kent State moment.
So, Joey, I mean, to what Gil is saying, when you look at it, and I understand what you're saying, John, the kind of second by second, milliseconds are going to matter. And in the millisecond, you know, did he feel scared? Suddenly something goes from this level to this level. Okay. But I guess what you see when you look at this, and I don't know how you can't see it, Joey, is that it didn't have to end this way. Right? He could have stepped away, as angry as he may have been in that moment, and she would have driven off because she had turned the wheel. They could have arrested her. They could do whatever they wanted to do later. They had as her wife said, you got our license number.
Yes.
All right, moving on to other global news. Ukraine has said that Russian forces have struck 2 cargo vessels off its southern coast in the Black Sea, killing a Syrian crew member aboard one of the ships. President Zelensky has accused Moscow of exploiting harsh winter weather to intensify its assault on Ukrainian cities.
Russians are exploiting the weather, the cold snap, trying to hit as many of our energy facilities as possible. So much for their respect for America and all diplomacy. Last night, over 200 Russian drones were launched, as well as a significant number of ballistic missiles, primarily targeting Kyiv.
Russia used an Erupts missile in the latest offensive, marking only the second time the weapon has been deployed since the war began nearly 4 years ago. The missile hit western Ukraine, what Kyiv described as a deliberate warning to NATO allies. In Kyiv, the four ministers of Britain and the Czech Republic and Ukraine toured the site of a Russian strike on a residential apartment building, underscoring continued diplomatic support as the conflict drags on. The UK Defense Secretary also met President Zelensky in Kyiv, condemning the latest Russian attacks and reaffirming Britain's commitment to Ukraine's security.
Talks about peace, but he's stepping up and escalating his attacks, not attacks on the Ukrainian military, but on civilians and cities like this. And there were 90 Shahid drones attacking Kyiv last night, many with targets at residential buildings like this.
London has announced it will allocate around $270 million to prepare for the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine. The funding follows Britain's pledge this week to contribute soldiers to a multinational force should a ceasefire be agreed upon. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has said Europe should reopen dialogue with Russia, while cautioning that it is far too early to discuss Moscow's return to the Group of Eight. Meloni said that she shares the view of French President Emmanuel Macron, who has called for engagement with Russia as efforts continue to bring the war to an end. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned Russia's attacks on civilian infrastructure, saying they have caused significant civilian casualties and left millions of Ukrainians without electricity, heating, and water during a critical humanitarian period.
Just last month, Ukraine blamed Moscow for attacks on cargo ferries transporting sunflower oil, fresh fruits, vegetables, and other food supplies, vital not just for Ukraine, but for global markets already under strain. The Black Sea, once a key artery for agricultural exports, is increasingly becoming a combat zone. Turkey has warned of a worrying escalation in the region, especially after Ukraine claimed naval drone attacks on tankers linked to Russia. In December, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged restraint, calling for a limited ceasefire on attacks targeting ports and energy facilities during talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The same month, Putin also vowed to intensify attacks on Ukrainian ships in Black Sea.
We might cut Ukraine off the sea to stop them from being involved with these piracy tactics.
Честно говоря, даже еще не получил информацию, знаю, что это происходило, атаки на танкеры в нейтральных или даже не нейтральных водах, а в особой экономической зоне другого государства, третьего государства. Это пиратство, не что иное. Значит, они раньше, украинские вооруженные силы, пытались наносить удары по нашим портам морским. Мы отвечали именно. Мы не начинали этих операций такими же ударами. Уверяю, что они гораздо более эффективные и мощные. И это прежде всего касалось тех судов, кораблей, на которых доставлялось в Украину военное имущество, оборудование военное и боеприпасы. И мы попадали.
We think we've made a lot of progress. We heard President Zelensky and some of the other people here talking about land options. That will be the most critical issue, and and we're going to be continuing on with those discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to meet or come up with certain compromises with regard to that. But I do want to say this. We are here to mediate and help in the peace process, and we're prepared to do anything necessary to get to that place.
This is a vital part of our Ironcast commitment to stand with Ukraine for the long term. It paves the way for the legal framework under which British, French and partner forces could operate on Ukrainian soil, securing Ukraine's skies and seas and regenerating Ukraine's armed forces for the future.
I made it clear that everybody's actually making a play for a particular thing. So now all these security protocols are kind of a little bit weird and awkward, like right now. I mean right now. They should have done this like maybe last year or 2 years back. But you know, this is a very, very crucial and peculiar moment. So now Trump is making a very big play, general overall. And you know, they actually predicted Russia to like make different kind of revenge play, attacks and all on Ukraine because they can't like attack the United States directly yet. So these are protocols put in place just to safeguard Ukraine.
For analysis, we're joined now by Greg Sullivan, Bloomberg's Russia economy and government editor. Morning, Greg. So we heard big talk there from Ukraine's allies. What exactly are they offering Kyiv?
Well, that's right. Leaders hailed progress made in talks to end the war, specifically Europe.
So this is actually going to be interesting, but really bad, really, really bad, because it is very good to be positive about peace and not to support violence, you know?
European leaders praised an alignment between the U.S., Europe, and Ukraine on security guarantees. Now, details were not ample during the talks, but there does appear to be an agreement for a multinational force to help provide that security guarantee for Ukraine. Separately, the French and the U.K. pledged to send troops as part of any multinational force if peace is reached. German Chancellor Merz appeared to leave the door open to German participation. But beyond that, the contours of such a force are not immediately clear. What we do know is that the U.S. will be involved in monitoring any truce or ceasefire through intelligence sharing, and did commit to try to help with any reassurances. But again, the security guarantee component has been very important for Kyiv and its allies. They do not want Russia to simply be able to restart hostilities in the case of peace actually being reached.
But Greg, will Russia's Vladimir Putin see this security backstop as tantamount to NATO membership? And therefore, is he likely to agree to peace at all? Does it just look like diplomatic posturing from the coalition of the willing?
That is a great point. That is a very important point. Previously, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ruled out the presence of NATO troops on Ukrainian soil after the conflict ends. This has been a red line for him, the NATO joining NATO. So it's unclear that he would accept this. In fact, Putin has shown no willingness to walk away from his demands thus far, and no willingness to really offer concessions to reach peace. So it does beg the question of what these security guarantees also exactly mean. Furthermore, there's still the outstanding issue of territory. Moscow is demanding parts of eastern Ukraine that they have not been able to capture militarily. They have not walked away from those demands or softened those demands, and that has been a red line for Kyiv, not wanting to cede territory that it still controls. So a huge sticking point there, and no clarity on whether Russia would actually accept the security guarantee agreements that the Europeans, U.S., and Ukraine have appeared to have reached.